I need somebody to play this game with me, for me to illustrate to everybody what I mean by these internal dimensions in which conflict exists. Now, I picked on Christelle because I know her, but again, it doesn't have to be her. If anybody else wants to jump in, please feel free to volunteer. I don't want to pick on the people that I know because you might think this was staged, you know? So are you up for playing, Pretty? Okay, cool. So I'm going to ask you a very simple question, okay? And just try and answer as best as you can. So can you tell me, what do you know about cats? You know the animal, the cat, 4 legs and a tail. What do you know about them? Just tell us anything that comes to mind.
They're very clean and they love being around people.
Okay, so they're very clean. Keep going. What else? Keep going. Keep
and
going.
Very nice animal that you could love to have around your house.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. I'm not sure if it, because you're also wearing glasses, your eyes are not very clear, but let me ask you this question. Tell me something. As you were telling us about cats, what color was the cat that you saw in your mind?
I think gray.
Okay. So now just pause for a second, right? Were you aware that there's a gray cat in your mind before I asked you to look for it?
No.
Right. Now, I hope everybody's paying attention to this, because this moment is critical. Why is it critical? Because everything that Pretty said, and she would continue saying, would be a description or commentary, if you like, on the video of a gray cat in her mind. Now, again, before we continue with Pretty, I'm going to ask every one of you, in your mind, what color was the cat that your mind produced in response to my question? What do you know about cats? So let's quickly go around the room, as it were, and just find out from everybody. Eileen, what cat was in your mind?
I had two, a gray cat, a gray tabby.
Great. So you had a gray tabby. Now it happens to be gray, but it's a different cat, right? Ah, there's Debs. Hi, Debs.
Very different from Pretty's, I know.
Exactly. Okay. Alan, any comments?
Yeah, I also had a great tabby because I got one. So that
Okay,
was in
so,
my mind.
so this is, it happens to be a coincidence. Don't be fooled. The word gray means completely different things to different people, as you will see. Who's the other one? Sanele, I don't know you, but hello, welcome. Sanele, what kind of cat was roaming in your mind?
Black and white.
Black and white, excellent. Christelle, are you there?
Yes, mine was black, and I don't like cats.
Okay, so now listen. I mean, wow. I mean, the word cat is as simple a word as you can find, right? Imagine with the students, which I used to have up till December, I used to play this game with them, and I say, okay, tell me now what you know about impedance, and they will just go like, gone, because they got nothing in their mind. So the first step is, when we're talking about a simple thing as a cat, not one of us is having the same experience. Okay, so this is critical. So therefore, when there's conflict, of which conflict resolution may follow, if we're not seeing the same cat, how on earth are we ever going to agree on anything? Pretty's cat might be, I don't know, playing in the house. Christelle's cat is black. She doesn't like them. They must be out of the house. Eileen has a gray tabby. I don't know what it's doing somewhere else. We're not talking about the same thing. So how on earth are we trying to resolve a conflict when each one of us is in a fantasy of their own? So that's number one. The other most important thing, really important thing, is that, as Pretty said, you know what? Until you asked me to look for the cat, I didn't know, I wasn't conscious that there's a gray cat doing stuff in my mind. Now, I'm going to be a little bit bold here, and perhaps, I hope it's not too controversial. I'm going to say the following. It's only the moment that Pretty experienced of becoming conscious of what we call subconscious representations, in other words, the gray cat in her mind, that only then, bold statement, can Pretty be called human. Why am I saying that? Because up till that moment, whatever was going on in her mind unconsciously was driving her behavior. It's only the moment where a person becomes conscious of the subconscious representations. In the case of Pretty, she imagined a gray cat in some sort of a house. We will find out from her in a minute. The moment she realized, because I asked her, what color is the cat? She paused. And then she was quiet for a moment. She said, what? What color is? And then she said, hey, there's a gray cat in my mind. My goodness. That is the moment you can say, now this is your birthday, in the sense that from this point onward, you can call yourself human. Why? Because before this moment, your behavior was driven by something that you were not aware of. Why am I saying that? Because the video of the gray cat in her mind was the source of everything she was going to tell us about cats. And she wasn't aware of it. Of course, now that she's aware of it, let's see what can be done. So, Pretty, if I can continue with you, this gray cat that you spoke about, can you tell us what is it doing in your mind?
Just playing around.
Fantastic. And when you see it in your mind, how far from you is this cat? Is it close to you? Is it far away? How far is it in your mind?
Far away from me.
Like 1 meter, 5 meters at the other end of the room?
1 meter away. Just
okay.
1 meter away.
Great. Now I want you to try this, all right? Imagine if this cat in your mind comes closer to you. Closer and closer. How do you feel?
Irritated, maybe.
Okay. Now imagine the cat going away, going further and further and further away from you.
I feel okay because it's not in my space.
Right. But now there's no cat. There's no coming or going. And you just told us that just now you felt irritated. Now you feel better. What just happened? I mean, if you want to be scientific about this, if we were to take a blood sample from your arm, right, before we started talking about this, and you'd get a certain, certain ingredients in your bloodstream, hormones and what have you, and then you felt irritated. If we were to take another blood sample then that blood sample would be different from the one before. And again, here we're playing a game, right? Cats. If we're talking something more emotionally charged, let's talking about politics. Right? Oh, right? Your reaction will be a lot more stronger. So please don't underestimate the intensity of what's possible against the little game that we're playing. I mean, this is a little game, right? But if we spoke about something more serious, then obviously your emotional charge will be higher. The point that I'm making is the way that you feel, as well as your complete physiology, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your hormonal balance, everything in your mind, your fight and flight response. I mean, we can go into it discussing all that, not for now, has been altered by a mental movie of a cat that appeared to be coming closer or going further away. And up to the moment where I asked you to look for it, you were not aware of it. So now this is the foundation of what I want to discuss with you guys, okay? This is where conflict exists, not outside. It's never the other person, it's never the situation, it's how it appears in your mind. And because it appears outside of awareness, what do? We project and say, no, this is the problem, the person, the situation, I must change that. Perhaps there's merit in that. I'm not saying situations should not change. But before we change them outside, let's see what the effect is within. I'm just going to pause there quickly for any quick questions, because really this is the foundation. If you understand this, the rest becomes very straightforward. Any questions so far? Is this clear to everyone? And so from this perspective now, okay, from the perspective of what? Hang on. Everything that happens, every relationship that I'm in, whether it's a good relationship or a bad relationship, is embedded in fantasy, which results in an emotion. And what it is possible for us from this point going forward is that you can become aware of that. And at least start by owning, hang on, when I hear the word X, Y, and Z, guns, for example, that's a hot word for a lot of people, right? And I go into a state which is disturbed, Let me pause in that moment and go, hang on a second. What kind of movie am I watching in my mind regarding cats, regarding guns, regarding politics, regarding whatever it is? Own that. Realize it's your stuff. It's got nothing to do with the environment. Then find out what the other person's fantasy is. Because if you're imagining a gray cat that you like having around the house, and Christelle is imagining a black cat that she doesn't like, how the hell are you ever going to agree on anything? And the worst thing, which happens all the time, I mean, I've been in education for 40 years. I can tell you, this is the only thing about education that nobody knows. Education happens in the brains of students, not in the material, not in the lecture, not in the lab. It happens in the brain of each student. And the student's job, and the lecturer, of course, is to make the same movie. If what the lecturer is saying in front of the class is directly received by the student's brain, education would take a week. You could cover the whole of physics, the whole of maths, everything in minutes. And so this backwards and forwards, trying to verify what is the one person saying versus what is the other person saying, is the foundation of what we are talking about. And it so happens that we're discussing conflict resolution. Okay? And so I'm assuming now everybody's got this foundational piece. So what I'd like to do next is I want to share my screen. So here's the summary of the steps. As I said, this could be applied in any context. Okay? But conflict resolution is a convenient way to explore. So what are the summary of the steps? First of all, establish the points of disagreement. We disagree about, I don't know, whatever it is. Okay, number one. So we say, what is the apparent cause of the disagreement? Number two, establish the inner positive intention for each point from both parties. Now, this is something that I need to expand a little bit on. In the case of any conflict, let's take, for example, fees must fall. I don't know if this is a convenient example. I'm just came to the top of my head. And so I'm going to share it with you as a means of an example, right? So on the one hand, you have students. On the other hand, you have university management. The positive intention from the university management perspective, let us assume now, because this is a fantasy story, all right, let us assume that the positive intention is to keep the institution going. We need money to fund this thing. We have to do it in a certain way. There's a whole lot of rules around it. The positive intention is to keep the university running. The students, on the other hand, have a different intention. Okay, they say, look, without education, we sink. So this is a life and death for them, for some of them, I don't know. Let's assume that. So on the one hand, there's a bunch of people fighting for their life, their livelihood. On the other hand, there's a bunch of people trying to preserve the integrity of the institution into the future. But the argument is about the fees. And everything they say to each other is about fees. So before we get to discussing fees, let us be clear that the one person wants the institution to continue and the other person wants to keep their livelihood or their survival to remain possible. We must be mindful of those things because actually that's where the conflict lies. And when people look at each other and they have their own fantasy, it's their positive intention that defines what they do and the energy they have behind it. The next step is go into each person's inner representations of the desired outcome. Here we're exploring the world of the cat. When you ask the university guy, hey, listen, for you to fulfill your intention, what? He says, no, people must pay fees because without money, the institution will sink. The lecturers will be fired. The whole thing will collapse. Okay. Oh, okay. So this is the movie in your head. You're seeing a burning university. You're seeing lecturers destitute. This is the movie you're watching in your head. On the student side, whatever fantasy they have, they must also share. So now suddenly we are looking at the real cat in the two parties' minds. So we've established the emotional anchor, the positive intention, and we've established the mental fantasy which informs this emotional reaction, okay, which makes it real. Next one. Here we come to the resolution part. Awaken the dormant creative part in each party and let the two creative parts meet. Now, this is a very radical thing. You've never heard of such things. Let's explore that. So if we were to say to the university person, listen, if you were feeling great right now, if you're on the beach and you're just fantasizing about how this university can be, would you come up with new ideas, new ways of running the place and so on? And the person, you know, it takes a little bit of time. I'm rushing through it now because our time is limited. He might go and say, you know, actually, when I'm in this relaxed state of mind, I can come up with a lot of ideas. And then you go to the other person and say, hey, listen, if this matter of student fees wasn't an issue anymore and it wasn't a problem and you could fantasize about your future, the future of South Africa, how would you like things to be? How would that feel? No, that might feel great. And then in the same way, coax them to step into a creative state of mind. And then here's the critical part. If you get those people to meet in that state of mind, because when they meet the one fighting for their life and the one fighting for their institution, they can never agree on anything. But if you've shifted their state of mind and the way they feel and put them into a creative stage, then let them meet. Who knows what might happen? Now, again, this is all fantasy land, just sharing this as an example. I'm sure you've all had an experience where maybe you were traveling and you were having lunch somewhere and there were some people sitting in the table next door and said, hey, hello, you know, I'm from South Africa or I'm from somewhere, whatever, and where are you from? No, I'm from Italy and whatever it is. And you start having a conversation because there's no issue on the table. You meet as creative strangers. And then the conversation normally is quite inspiring. So the point is, if those two parties don't shift into a creative space, the chances of resolving the conflict are very low, if not zero. Whatever new ideas come up from this creative interaction, so identify creative options, okay, so that all positive intentions are satisfied. So in other words, how could the two of us, being in a creative, relaxed state of mind, come up with ideas other than what's on the table right now, to satisfy both the institution continuing and the student's livelihood being preserved? And there, I have no answer because these things emerge. You cannot imagine them beforehand. They will come up in ways that we can't even imagine. And this is where human spirit and human creativity becomes amazing. In that sense, the kind of resolution that happens is not just resolving the conflict, it also provides the motive for moving forward with inspiration. Okay, so that's another step of the puzzle. Then you must test this new idea or ideas. So test identified new options in the context chosen as the benchmark. In the case of student negotiations, right, you say, okay, fine, in a particular institution. I used to work for CPUT. The situation is very different from what it is, let's say, at UJ, where I used to work before, or UCT, or any other institution, right? Because the dynamics are different. So whatever ideas come up, you must now translate them into activities that are relevant to the context in which this thing belongs. And then finally, the last step in the world that I come from, this is called an ecology test. So in other words, what you need to do here is you need to take whatever ideas you have, which have been creatively produced by two inspired people rather than two defensive people, and you need to run those ideas past all the stakeholders. How will this new scheme that we've come up with affect the cleaners? How will it affect the lecturers? How will it affect the finance people? How will it affect HR? How will it affect the student's family? How will it affect students in future? A whole bunch of stakeholders need to be thought of and the solution finally tuned to be effective, not only now, but in the future. In summary, I've introduced to you a new dimension of a subconscious world in which movies arise, which define our behavior in the external world. Those subconscious representations evoke emotions, which then make it necessary for individuals sometimes to fight for their lives, even though there's nothing threatening them in the world outside. When this dimension is revealed to both parties, they step off it and step into a creative state. Now, these are big steps. I'm not saying this lightly. It doesn't happen in a second, but it's possible. From a creative perspective, new solutions arise. Those solutions get checked in the reality of the situation, and then inspiration is what informs the implementation. I hope this is sufficient for now, given the time constraints that we have. Any questions?
I do have a question, Panos.
Go ahead.
If I can ask you, just in terms of, if we can just go back to your fantasy hypothesis
Yes.
of the fees must fall.
Right.
Now, and I don't want to take this as a realistic, it's a fantasy hypothesis, but I just want to ask you the question. So what WITS has now done is that they've suspended the president of the SRC.
Right.
I'm assuming now this is where at point 4, your point 4, which is awaken the dormant creative part.
Yes.
He no longer participates in that.
Yes.
Would that be your solution or not?
No. You see,
okay, because
remember, the question you're asking is of a complex situation.
I understand.
We're not really discussing that. I thought, let me give it as an example.
I know.
I could have talked about, a husband and a wife having an argument. Doesn't matter.
I understand.
So if you ask me a specific question, like what should we do about the president who's in prison? Well, that's a different discussion. So I can have this conversation with you later if you like, but for the sake of this example, I don't want to go down that route.
No. So Panos, what I'm saying is that you're saying when you go into that situation of awakening the dormant creative part, you've got to eliminate elements which will not be conducive to
Yes. And I might add something that I didn't mention. There is such a thing as what they call the Clare Graves scale of human development mapping. So you have to identify where on the Graves scale are these people. That's a whole different discussion. We don't have time for that now. Then there's Ken Wilber with his 4 quadrants. That's another discussion. So what I'm presenting to you is really a sliver of the tip of the iceberg, of which 98% is still under the ocean. I just wanted to make clear that everybody knows, hey, hang on a second. All arguments, all dispute is inside your mind. Clean that space, then come find solutions outside. That's the summary.
Yeah, no, it's been fascinating. Thank you, Panos. It's been amazing.
Panos?
Yes.
Panos, Christel, I know you don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I want to.
Okay, go.
So I just want to just go there. She just said that they have suspended the SRC.
Yes.
But that then that stops the conflict resolution because they do not now have the space to find the creativity that you've spoken about.
Absolutely. But
and I think the conflict has not been resoluted. It's just been thrown out somewhere.
Okay. Now wait, hang on. This is very important. Now you're going into the Graves scale world. The actions that are taken are also interpreted not as an individual, but as a collective. So again, if you saw videos of students toying and trying to talk to in those days, it was the chancellor of UCT, short little guy, but the rules say, and the students say, we've got power. They're on a different value system. So the way that imprisoning the chairman of the SRC is translated into that worldview is very different the way you would interpret it to the rule-driven world of the UCT vice chancellor. So the level of conflict now goes in layers. We haven't gone into that. Again, I'm happy to explore all these things, but what I'm saying is it gets a little bit more complicated. And like I said, yes, please, Leon, go ahead.
Yeah, if I can add something, I also think conflict resolution depends on agreement. So if I have conflict with Panos, I would say, I have a conflict with you. Can we go into conflict resolution? And then he would say, yes. Now, in the absence of that, obviously, there's no process possible.
Right.
I think what Panos is illuminating today is if there's agreement that we go into resolution, then this is the angle, the window that often people don't even think about.
Yes.
But in the meantime, they're holding that picture of representation of conflict very firmly in their own subconscious. And this is where we take the lid off this morning. That I appreciate.
Yes. the point that Leon's making is people must want to resolve the conflict. If
Yeah.
they don't even want to, unfortunately, the only way forward is pain. Now, the pain normally manifests in war as an extreme manifestation until eventually they shoot each other and they realize, well, now we must resolute. They come together as a last resort. So pain will drive them to resolution. The question is, how much pain can you handle? But that's, again, going sideways off the topic. The topic is there's a subconscious world in which we live. This subconscious world is motivated by emotion, and all of that is projected on what we think, and I'm stressing the word think, is the other. If we don't start within, there can be no resolution outside. Christelle, I don't know if that answers your question, but the point is both parties must want to find a solution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very
You're
interesting.
You're welcome. Look, by the way, part of what we did, I did this in Communication 1 back in 76 probably, or 77. And I was blown away then, and I've been involved in this inner world since then. For those who don't know me, my PhD studies were done at ESCOM, strangely enough, National Control, for 10 years, exploring the subconscious world of the national controllers, the guys that run the grid. So I can talk about that for days if you like. Any other questions or any other comments? The complexity of this is huge, but if we don't start at the basics, a simple cat in your mind, nothing happens.
Yeah.